This is the Art of Darkness podcast with Kevin Kautzman.
And Brad Kelly. We're a couple of very online writers interested in the dark side of what drives creative people to create against all odds.
This show is about art and the people who make it, what it costs them, and what it takes to bring something unique and impactful into the world.
Each episode, we excavate the life and work of an artist you might think you know.
Don't worry, they're all safely dead.
On every episode, we try and find out just what the hell was wrong with them and how they worked through their darkness to create something that lives on after them and continues to move culture.
Find us online at artofdarkpod.com and on Twitter at artofdarkpod.
You want to be careful that if you're going to say something against the regime, that it counts, right?
Yes.
You know, like,
yeah. Indeed. It is true. All right. The early plays were influenced by other Elizabethan dramatists like Thomas Kidd and Christopher Marlowe. Do you know much about Christopher Marlowe, Brad?
I do know a bit about Christopher Marlowe. Yeah.
What do you know?
He's one of the other candidates for possibly being Shakespeare. The challenge to that is that he died 1580s, 90s. He died in the 1590s officially. And so we'll talk a little bit more about this in my episode. He's a very, very talented writer, possibly collaborated with whoever Shakespeare was early on and was well respected, but publicly fell from grace and was murdered in a bar. Stabbed in the eye.
He was stabbed in the eye. I did not know that. Well, he was there was blasphemy, homosexual.
Yeah,
libel.
he was likely homosexual and perhaps an atheist as well, which was a kind of a dangerous thing to be politically at the time.
But also wicked famous and
yes.
Like a big deal.
He would have right. Yeah, he was very, very well known. Yeah.
Yeah, but he was born in 64 and died in 93.
93. Yeah.
Did not live to be very long.
But give me a second to shoot, because I have a whole thing about him for our After Dark for my DeVere episode. We're going to talk about the fact that did he actually die? There's some good evidence. Did he die in 1593 or not?
He may have been sheep dipped. It looks like he might have been a spy. Possibly. Okay. All right. Well, Brad's got that. So
there was there's one thing to know about Elizabethan era. There was a lot of spying going on. Like there were feds everywhere, basically. Yes.
Cool. And wasn't John Dee? John
Dee was a spy. He was. It was known by everybody that he worked for the Queen, so I think his spying mostly happened on the continent, but there were spies within England at all levels of society. Yeah.
Very intriguing.
Well, I cannot partially wait. Because Mary, Queen of the Scots, a lot of people thought she should be queen. She was the Catholic. So it comes into this Catholic versus Protestant thing. It comes through this controversy about who actually belongs on the throne. It comes from Spain constantly trying to take over. There's a lot happening. So, yeah.
Cool. Yeah. I love stuff like that on Art of Darkness. Okay, so I'll leave a little more for you when you do your episode. Okay.
Sure. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So he was influenced by Marlowe, also by medieval drama traditions, Seneca's plays. The Comedy of Errors follows classical models. We haven't found a source for The Taming of the Shrew. There was an earlier version of it called A Taming of a Shrew or something. This is the play's story of a man taming a woman's independent spirit often troubles modern critics and audiences.
Huh.
Well,
okay. Did they try electrocuting them? All right, that's a callback to the Sylvia Plath episode.
Oh yeah. I remember.
Yes.
All right, so here's a little bit going back to the Ackroyd book. In the summer of 1592, the newly formed Pembroke's men were obliged to leave London. The available record suggests that the plague of this year was particularly virulent in the neighborhood of Shoreditch, where Burbage, Shakespeare, and other players lived. The exact route of this late summer tour is not completely known. But there is a record of Pembroke's men playing at Leicester as one stop in a more extended tour that must have included Coventry, Warwick, and Stratford-upon-Avon. We may say with some confidence that Shakespeare was reunited with his family in the late summer of 1592. Shakespeare and his companions traveled in a wagon, the players packed in with the baskets containing the costumes and with the essential stage properties. One of the actors of Pembroke's men, mortally ill in that summer, was obliged to sell his share of apparel nubod. That's sad. They might manage at best approximately 30 miles per day. It was an uncomfortable and overcrowded mode of traveling, but the alternative was to walk. One of the stage directions in The Taming of the Shrew is, enter two of the players with packs at their backs and a boy. It is possible that some players took their horses with them, but the cost of upkeep on an extended tour was very high. They lodged at inns for the night and played there for the price of their beds and suppers. This manner of life, difficult and uncertain in many respects, did have the virtue of encouraging a sense of fraternity among the actors. They were an extended family. It may even have become for Shakespeare a welcome substitute for his existing one. They took with them trumpets and drums to announce their arrival in every new town. They had to, I love that. Yeah, we're here. Boom, 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 boom. And you can just know there's just somebody who fucking hates like plays.
Right.
Even then,
here they come.
God,
Yeah.
The minister is just like, not again.
Yeah.
They had to present the burgesses with a paper authorizing them to perform and a letter or some authority from the Earl of Pembroke to prove that they were not sturdy beggars to be whipped out of town. The mayor or chief magistrate then asked them to perform before a selected audience, for which a reward would generally be given. Only then were they granted permission to play in the inn yards or in the Guildhall. There were purpose-built playhouses, however, in larger places such as Bristol and York. That is cool. It's like we got it. Boom, 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 we're here. And I'm sure they'd probably have letters ahead of time and there'd be like an established, there's probably a lot of ad hoc, like, hey, we're going to play for our supper tonight, sing for our supper, you know, and then also, So Shakespeare came to know Ipswich and Coventry, Norwich and Gloucester in the course of approximately 20 years of intermittent traveling on the road. The company with which he was associated for most of his career, the Lord Chamberlain's men, traveled extensively in East Anglia and Kent. They also journeyed to Carlisle and Newcastle upon Tyne, Plymouth and Exeter, Winchester and Southampton. They visited altogether some 80 towns and 30 noble households, even making the journey up to Edinburgh. This was an important aspect of Shakespeare's experience of the world. In the summer and autumn of 1592, it may have been the only viable means of earning a living. All right. So we're getting more sense of like what he was up to. Let's see here. So this is good. I'm going to read some more. This is quite good. Pembroke's men were not simply a group of traveling players. They were invited to perform before the Queen during this Christmas season, a signal honor for a company so recently established. They attained this degree of recognition in part because of the acting of Richard Burbage, who I'm going to talk about. But their success may have also been connected with the plays they performed. Among these were The Taming of a Shrew, Titus Andronicus, and the two plays on the reign of Henry VI. We may now conclude that Shakespeare had achieved some renown on his own part, perhaps among his fellows rather than the spectators who flocked to see the plays, not least because he was bitterly attacked in this year by Robert Greene. In the autumn of 1592, Greene's autobiographical pamphlet, Groatsworth of Wit, bought with 1 million of repentance, condemned that only shakes scene in a country who supposes he is able to bombast out a blank verse as the best of you. This suggests an element of rivalry and competitiveness in Shakespeare's nature. The best of you refers to the university playwrights, among them Marlowe, Nash, and Greene himself, the fancy lads. It was, in other words, a continuation of that war of words which Nash and Greene had begun 3 years before. Greene describes his rival as one of those puppets, that spake from our mouths, those antics garnished in our colors. He's saying that Shakespeare was a player, moreover, a player who had acted in the dramas of Greene and his contemporaries, and therefore not worthy of serious consideration. He's just an actor. He's a prop that eats. This guy thinks he's a playwright, but he's just a fucking actor.
Right.
Say your lines.
Right.
Say your lines, puppet. Yeah. Um, I bear no such feelings. I love all of my actors. Yeah, I actually do. But this is quite funny. Because the young Shakespeare was one of the few who attained the dual role of actor and playwright, Green berates him as an absolute Johannes factotum, or jack of all trades. He also intimates that, having supplied Shakespeare with lines, either acted or purloined, he had in his deathbed now been forsaken. Trust them not, he warns, and calls Shakespeare an upstart crow, beautified with our feathers, whose tiger's heart is wrapped in a player's hide. Accused of being an unlearned upstart plagiarist, Shakespeare would have questioned unlearned, although he had not attended university. His plays are stuffed with classical allusions, but he could hardly deny the charges of plagiarism. His early plays were bedecked with lines and echoes from Marlowe.
Yeah.
He was stealing bars,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
So, okay.
Right. This is
The
why
chart,
this is why one of the reasons that people think Marlowe wrote the Shakespeare plays, because there's like a lot of saying the same thing. Not it doesn't undermine the entire Shakespeare oeuvre, but there's some pieces for sure.
yeah. The charge throws a suggestive light on a little fable that Greene included in his pamphlet, which immediately succeeded the assault upon Shakespeare and concerned the ant and the grasshopper. Greene compared himself to the grasshopper, and we are left to wonder who the ant might be. Okay. All right. So he's, there's some battles. It's like Drake and Kendrick Lamar, but
Yeah. Yeah.
in Elizabethan England.
Yeah. I love it. I love it.
Yeah. All right. Okay.
I'm surprised it never broke out into violence because it was also a fairly violent time.
It's entirely possible that it did, and we just don't know. I mean,
yeah, that's true. Yeah.
You sort of think that they would have written about it if it had, but
yeah,
very interesting. All right, I'm going to start moving us along here. So during the 1593 and 1594 plague closures, Shakespeare published two narrative poems, Venus and Adonis and the Rape of Lucretia, dedicated to Henry Wriothesley, Earl of Southampton. These poems, along with A Lover's Complaint and The Phoenix and the Turtle, display the narrative poetry skills that he has. Okay, so fine. So he can't do theater for a couple of years, so he's gonna write. Yeah, and this is a little bit about A Lover's Complaint. This is from the Wikipedia. Is an example of the female voiced complaint, which is frequently appended to sonnet sequences. So it's like a type of writing. And consists of 47 7-line stanzas written in the form known as rhyme royal. So the rhyme scheme is A, B, A, B, B, C, C, a meter identical to that of Shakespeare's longer narrative poem, The Rape of Lucretia. The poem begins with a description of a young woman weeping at the edge of a river into which she throws torn up letters, rings, and other tokens of love. An old man nearby approaches the woman and asks the reason for her sorrow. She responds by telling him a former lover who pursued, seduced, and finally abandoned her. She recounts in detail the speech her lover gave to her, which seduced her. She concludes her story by conceding that she would fall for the young man's false charms again. Oh, that infected moisture of his eye. Oh, that false fire which in his cheek so glowed. Oh, that forced thunder from his heart did fly. Oh, that sad breath his spongy lungs bestowed. Oh, all that borrowed motion seeming owed would yet again betray the fore-betrayed and new pervert a reconciled maid. And new pervert a reconciled maid.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, I mean the dude could. I mean,
yeah.
Let's just like take it on its face. I mean, it's bangers.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, for sure.
I mean, let me read the first stanza. From off a hill whose concave womb rewarded a plaintful story from a sistering vale, my spirits to attend this double voice accorded, and down I laid to list the sad tuned tale. Ere long espied a fickle maid, full pale, tearing of papers, breaking rings atwain, storming her world with sorrow's wind and rain. Upon her head a plaited hive of straw, which fortified her visage from the sun, whereon the thought might think sometime I saw the carcass of beauty spent and done. Time had not scythed all that youth begun, nor youth all quit, but spite of heaven's fell rage, some beauty peeped through lattice of seared age. I almost don't want to stop reading it. It's so like, it's just juicy. It's just wonderful. Really, really good. And just a poet and a playwright, of course. Yeah. It seems like you maybe know a few things about these poems, Brad.
I guess, we'll get there. Yeah. No,
Okay.
they're good. But yes, there are some there are some details. Yeah.
There's a little juice. Okay, good. All right, fun. This is I like thinking of this as like a tag team. It's all kind of be one episode, but you know, they're going to stand on their own, but this is a fun one. Okay. So let's see here. It's just a little bit about the plays. All right. So his early comedies are marked by tight double plots and precise comic sequences. In the 1590s, these would evolve into more romantic atmospheres. A Midsummer Night's Dream blends romance, fairy magic, and comic low-life scenes. I love that, comic low-life scenes. There's a lot of body stuff in Shakespeare. There's a lot of dick jokes. There's a lot of sex jokes. There's a lot of nasty double, triple entendres. You missed it because the language is maybe is different from ours. But if you study it, or you can kind of get the sense of it, it's very, very fun.
Well, and there's also there's that, and then there's also just like murder and sword fights, and like that's the thing I think that gets lost in the schoolification or PBSification of Shakespeare. Is it's like, these are not like sort of uptight. They're not uptight at all, really, in terms of what's actually happening in the plays.
Yeah. No, totally, and they're popular entertainment. Yeah, that's that. I mean, here's an example. I've been rewatching The Sopranos. Just as I took that trip to Alaska, I was at that theater conference. Had a great time at the Valdez Theater Conference. If you're a playwright and you're interested in like attending a conference, cannot recommend that highly enough. Everybody was fantastic up there, and I got a lot out of it. Really cool. And Valdez, Alaska is beautiful. I think their website is just like theaterconference.org. So it's like
nice.
RE theaterconference.org. So there you go. Apply to that if you haven't. If you got a play you want to work on, just so cool. I mean, Valdez is like, it's like a fairyland, dude. I mean, it's a fjord. I mean, it's surrounded by mountains and just incredible. But I'm watching that and they keep talking about shy business. In shy business is a line that they use in the Sopranos. What the hell is shy business? What do you think shy business is? Where do you think that comes from?
I don't know. I have no idea.
It means I read. Yeah. I don't think this is bullshit. It comes from Shylock business, and it means loan sharking. Yeah. I want to get my shy. I want to get my shy business going. Let's listen to it again.
Yeah.
It comes from Shylock.
Yeah, and Shylock was a word invented by Shakespeare. Well, it was a character name.
It's a character.
Merchant of Venice.
So there you go. So there's your, there it is. Yeah. And it's right here. The Merchant of Venice features Shylock, a portrayal that can appear derogatory, as we know, and so forth. All right. So now I've got, going back to the Ackroyd book. Let's see here. All right. So there's more theater business. Let's see. I want to make sure I get the right. The immediate problems of the Lord Chamberlain's men had not been lifted by royal or noble favor. The city authorities still seemed eager to close down the theater in the Curtain, and James Burbage had already been making plans to convert part of Blackfriars into a roofed playhouse, since Blackfriars was a liberty, an area where the city's powers of arrest did not run. Yeah, there are these things called liberties where like the city had no authority. They were like independent sovereign zones. They're like inner zone. Right in London. Yeah.
Open air drug markets.
Yeah.
Something, I don't know. Who knows what happened there?
Burbage had also been involved in difficult negotiations with the landlord of the theater, Giles Allen, who wished to profit from the success of the playhouse. He increased the ground rent from £14 to £24 per annum, and Burbage agreed that Allen would eventually be able to take possession of the building after a number of years. But Allen seemed to have gone too far in his demand that the theater become his property after only 5 years. Burbage demurred and began to invest in Blackfriars. Throughout the summer of 1596, he was engaged in tearing down tenements and converting an old stone building known as the Freighter, or refectory, in the precincts of the ancient monastery. It was his insurance policy. He even arranged that his master carpenter, Peter Street, should move down to the river in order to be close to the site. And so this is just hinting at, like, this theater was big business at the time. I mean, it still is to the degree, but this was like, these were like movies of the time.
Yeah, there's no other public entertainment.
Right.
Really.
Not really. I mean, it'd be music, and it's all part of this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even the music you encountered would probably be part of some
it's like in context of
production.
Yeah. On the 23rd of July, 1596, Henry Carey, Lord Hunsdon, at the age of 70, died at Somerset House. His successor as Lord Chamberlain, Lord Cobham, was much less sympathetic to the theatrical profession. One of his ancestors, Sir John Oldcastle, had been mocked in the first part of King Henry IV. So, relations between the Lord Chamberlain and the Lord Chamberlain's men were not necessarily benevolent. That was, you said this like earlier. Here we are.
Yeah.
The players may even have feared that Cobham would support the Lord Mayor's request permanently to close down the public playhouses. As Thomas Nash put it in a letter of this time, however, in their old lord's time, they thought their state settled. It is now so uncertain they cannot build upon it. The players had begun a tour of Kent soon after Hunsdon's death. They were playing at the Market Hall of Faversham on the 1st of August, but once more they found themselves in an insecure profession. A few days after playing in Faversham, however, Shakespeare suffered a greater blow. His son of 11 years, Hamnet Shakespeare, died. There's every reason to suppose that Shakespeare hastened from Kent to Stratford for the funeral on the 11th of August. The death of a young son can have many and various effects. Did Shakespeare feel any sense of guilt or responsibility at having left his family in Stratford? And how did he respond to his grieving wife, who had been obliged to care for the children without his presence? We can't answer this. There are, however, some powerful lines in the second part of Henry IV, written shortly after these events, when Northumberland's wife blames his absence for the death of their son. The child threw many a northward look to see his father bring up his powers, but he did long in vain. Many of Shakespeare's later plays have the pervasive theme of families reunited and love restored. In The Winter's Tale, the son, Mamilius, dies as the result of his father's conduct. The boy who plays this part doubled as Perdita, the daughter who at the end of the play is restored to her errant father. In her form, the figure of the dead son is also revived. The death of children was much more common in the 16th century than now. Obviously, Elizabethan families were also more extended with various cousins and other kin, so that sudden death had a natural buttress against prolonged or severe grief. It is not necessary to fall into the delusion that 16th century parents were less caring or less emotional than their successors, but it's important to note that the death of a child was not an unusual experience. We don't know the cause, although at the end of that year, Stratford suffered a severe rise in mortality from typhus and dysentery. His twin sister, Judith, would live to the age of 70. So he loses his only son at this point. Let's see here. Yeah, it is. In the 12th Night, the story of identical twins, boy and girl, like his own, is resolved by the miraculous reappearance of the male child from apparent death. The twin is restored to life in the period immediately following Hamlet's death. As Stephen Dedalus noted, Shakespeare also rewrote the play concerning King John. One of his additions is a lament by Constance on the untimely death of her young son, which begins... He's got the weird spelling here, so I'll do my best.
Yeah.
Grief fills the room up of my absent child, lies in his bed, walks up and down with me, puts on his pretty looks, repeats his words, remembers me of all his gracious parts, stuffs out his vacant garments with his form. Then have I reason to be fond of grief. Fare you well. Had you such a loss as I would give better comfort than you do. Yeah. So heavy. I mean, goes through, you don't wish that on anyone, really.
Not at all.
Yeah. All right. So following the lyrical Richard II, Shakespeare introduced prose comedy in Henry IV, Part 1 and Henry II, Part 1 and Part 2, and Henry V, with the character Falstaff becoming a standout. This period begins and ends with two tragedies, Romeo and Juliet, we know, and Julius Caesar, which is based on Sir Thomas North's translation of Plutarch's Parallel Lives, which introduced a new kind of drama. Julius Caesar's, it's a banger. Yeah, and so is Antony.
That is one I read in high school, I think.
Yeah,
that's good.
So in 1599, Shakespeare and his business partners built their own theater on the south bank of the Thames, which they called the Globe Theater. So we're going to read a little bit about the Globe. You're going to like this, Brad.
All right.
Wait, actually, okay, let me go. I'm going back to the Shakespeare Alive because I like this stuff. Let me find the right page. Yes. This chapter is called Elizabethan Star Wars, Superstition and the Supernatural. Do you know why 13 is an unlucky number, or why it's a bad omen for a black cat to cross your path, or why knocking on wood is supposed to protect you? If you stop to think about it, you might conclude that you don't have any explanation for those superstitions, and yet they exert mysterious power on the way we behave. You'd have to look long and hard to find a skyscraper that has a floor number 13. Many people go to great lengths to avoid walking under ladders. And not long ago, a National League baseball team won a crucial victory after a black cat just happened to appear in front of the visiting team's dugout in the middle of the game. From that moment on, the players couldn't stop committing errors. The Elizabethans were no different. In fact, in an age before computers had been invented, before medical science understood disease, before astronomy, meteorology, and geology had learned much about the heavens and the earth, magical beliefs played an even larger role in daily life than they do today. I'd argue that we're not that different, but that's okay. Most Elizabethan households were well stocked with peculiar superstitions and strange practices. There might be a horseshoe over the door to ward off evil spirits, an astrological almanac on the table, a bowl of cream set out for the fairies every night, and a stockpile of charms to ward off ghosts and witches should they come a-knocking. Whether it was a magical cure for hiccups or a warning not to whistle after dark, few people questioned any of these beliefs or practices. The fact that their parents and grandparents had believed in them was good enough. The superstitious, idle-headed eld, Shakespeare says in The Merry Wives of Windsor, describing one tradition, received and did deliver to our age this tale of Herne, the hunter for a truth. No one really needed to know much more than that. And then it goes on to talk about the church. But this is just reminding you that stuff was very present. And I'm going back to the Ackroyd book here because a horoscope was consulted to determine the exact day for the opening of the Globe.
Yeah,
I love that stuff. Like, what is auspicious? Didn't we say, wasn't it on the podcast we just went on, the book club from hell? Wasn't it like millionaires have?
Oh, well, no, that was when Dexter came on and talked
Dexter was on ours.
Yeah, he had a guest on Scarlet Thread Society who was interested in done a lot of looking into Bitcoin and astrology correspondences. Yeah.
Right. And what was the line, though?
Millionaires don't practice astrology, but billionaires do.
Yeah, billionaires have astrologers. Right.
Yeah.
Millionaires don't believe in astrology, something like that. Yeah. Anyway,
she claims there's a kind of a whole like unspoken industry of astrological consultation at the highest levels of industry.
I would have no doubt of that. I would totally believe that.
But people don't say that that's what they're doing because your stakeholders would be like, what are you talking about? You kind of astrologer?
One of the most powerful arguments I ever heard for the efficacy of magic had to do with the power of chaos to rejigger outcomes. And it had to do with, it was a theory. And I don't know if they had ever tested it. I don't know. But I heard that there's the idea that like the shaman would throw bones to send the hunting party in random directions, which would contravene the hunting party's tendency to repeat old patterns, which would then effectively randomize their potential at re-encountering the animals, which of course are smart enough to like the animals don't have the ability to add a factor of chaos into their behavior. So if we humans have the ability to add a factor of chaos into our behavior, it could potentially give us some leverage over the animals.
Yeah, there is really something there. Yeah, it's because that is one of the attributes of a human is we have this ability to like perturb and like go against what our impulses are, and that's like an outside device. Like, nope, this is how we're going to randomize this, and maybe it'll work.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
Crowley very like codified this, wrote it into
yeah.
his practice. Like, roll a dice and then practice that religion for a day or a month or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. I mean, that
Mm-hmm.
that is some chaos, and
Yeah, yeah.
what power lives in it. I was listening to the Book Club from Hell episodes on Nick Land, and they were talking about apparently Nick Land has this theory that a lot of what happened in the Renaissance is that the number zero came to be
Oh,
understood by the
okay.
Europeans, and everything that's happened since then has sort of been followed on, like Europeans coping with the number
Yeah.
zero.
So is he
Um,
saying that the just discovering zero is a mistake?
I don't know if he's saying it's a mistake. I think
Yeah,
he's
yeah,
saying I don't know the exact point, but it's in that episode, and I don't know. But
yeah.
zero is this. What is
Right,
zero? We don't even.
right.
There's
So it doesn't
no
really work like a
philosophically. It
normal
doesn't.
war. There,
It's helpful, but
it's
is
not
it a
really a
number?
number. Not
Right. I
really.
mean, so it's that
Yeah,
chaos kind of point. Okay.
yeah,
In any
yeah,
case,
yeah.
yeah.
I love it.
A horoscope was consulted to determine the exact day for the opening of the globe. The play chosen for that auspicious occasion was Julius Caesar, and from allusions in the text itself, it is clear that it was first performed on the afternoon of the 12th of June, 1599. This was the day of the summer solstice and the appearance of a new moon. A new moon was deemed by astrologers to be the most opportune time to open a new house. There was a high tide at Southwark early that afternoon, which helped to expedite the journey of the playgoers coming from the north of the river. That evening, after sunset, Venus and Jupiter appeared in the sky. These may seem to be matters of arcane calculation, but to the actors and playgoers of the late 16th century, they were very significant indeed. It has been demonstrated, for example, that the axis of the globe is 48 degrees east of true north, and so was in fact in direct alignment with the midsummer sunrise. Astrological lore was a familiar and formative influence upon all the affairs of daily life. It is also the context for the supernatural visitations and prognostications in Julius Caesar itself. There is other evidence of the play's summer opening. In June 1599, the takings at Philip Henslow's Rose, neighbor to the new globe, registered a sharp fall, which must have been the result of new competition.
Huh.
It is a matter of record that Henslow and the actor-manager Alain soon decided to depart with the Admiral's men from the Rose and to resume acting at the newly built Fortune in the northern suburbs. The proximity of the Lord Chamberlain's men had been bad for business. Henslow was too good a manager to lose an asset, however, and he leased out the Rose to Worcester's men. The Rose was named after a whorehouse nearby, too. Like,
Nice.
yeah,
Of
that's
course.
some rocks, just rocks. Like, hey, come across the river, come down the river, come into
Hmm.
Southwark, see a
Yeah.
show,
Right. Right.
have
Right.
have a few beers after.
Yeah.
I got the
It's
place
a
is
night
called the
out.
Rose. It's a night
Yeah.
out. It's a night in the
Yeah.
town.
Yeah.
Yeah. Caesar was Shakespeare's first Roman play attuned to the gaudy classicism of the globe interior. A Roman setting complete with marbled pillars needed a Roman play. The stage directions for Thunder and Lightning also provided an opportunity to display the sound effects of the new theater. Unlike the extravagant playhouse, however, the play itself is a triumph of simple diction and chaste rhetoric. It is as if Shakespeare had somehow been able to assume the Roman virtues and to adopt the Roman style. Yeah, it's outstanding. The novelty of the new playhouse had also aroused his ambitions, since in Julius Caesar, there's a more subtle sense of character, of motive, and of consequence. So there you go. All right, so they opened the globe with Julius Caesar.
Cool. Cool. I
Yeah,
like
very
this
cool.
sort of the celestial alignment of it. The more I know about how old structures and things were built on that, I kind of start to wonder, like, maybe we're kind of screwing up by not doing that somehow. You know what I mean? Like, maybe there's something there. Maybe there's a reason why you line things up with the summer solstice sun, that
Mm-hmm.
by not doing it, somehow we're going off track in some way that's difficult to understand. Yeah.
For sure.
Mhm.
Yeah, it is. And never mind, like building like brutalist architecture,
Right,
like,
right,
yeah,
right,
and
right.
we're
Yeah.
not consulting yeah, yeah, tough one.
Yeah.
All right. So ownership of the globe was shared among actors of the Lord Chamberlain's men, with significant shareholders, including Richard Burbage and his brother Cuthbert Burbage. I've got stuff
Cuthbert
about
Burbage is the name.
Cuthbert
That's a full name.
Burbage. Oh yeah. Oh yeah, doggy. All right. Let me see. I have to have it here somewhere. Oh my God, I've got so many notes. We're really going to get into Hamlet and the Tempest here.
Cool.
Shakespeare himself initially held a 1/8 share, which eventually diminished over his career.
Hmm.
The construction of the Globe involved the timbers from an earlier theater called the Theater, which had been dismantled and transported across the Thames to avoid legal disputes with the owner, Giles Allen, who we mentioned once here already. Hang on, remember, my one mouse has died. I'm trying to get it back. There it is.
Oh, no.
All right. Bluetooth mouse.
Ah.
Right. This new theater was built on marshy land, requiring raised earth and timber revetments to support the structure and protect it from flooding. The Globe was a larger structure than its predecessor, boasting a polygonal shape with 20 sides. And this was only discovered in like the 1980s and late 1980s. The Globe's architecture featured a 3-story open-air amphitheater capable of holding up to 3,000 spectators.
Wow.
3,000.
That's a big room.
It included a yard surrounded by more expensive tiered seating, a wide stage protruding into the yard, and a tiring house for actors' preparations. The stage area, supported by large columns, included trapdoors and an upper balcony for varied performance needs. The design of the Globe, particularly its use of space and the heavens painted on the ceiling of the stage canopy, exemplified the innovative theater architecture of the time. The Globe's name likely plays on the metaphor of the world as a stage, a concept familiar to contemporary audiences through various literary references. While the exact origin of the name remains debated, the theater's association with global and universal themes and performances is widely acknowledged. All right, so Shakespeare has another loss that comes up here with the loss of his father. I'm going to read a little bit about this. On the 8th of September, 1601, John Shakespeare was buried in the old church at Stratford. His son was undoubtedly present and walked in procession with new bailiff Richard Quiney. John Shakespeare was in his 70s, but seems to have left no will. By natural right, therefore, Shakespeare inherited the double house in Henley Street as well as architectural lands belonging to his father. John Shakespeare was, in fact, more prosperous than is generally assumed. He may have characterized himself as a man of small wealth in the Westminster courts, but the reality was very different. In the following year, Shakespeare began to invest a great deal of money, amounting to approximately £500. A lot of money, multiple houses. Yeah. He kept the house where his widowed mother continued to live in the company of her daughter, Joan Hart, and her daughter's family. Joan Hart, Joan Hart had married a local hatter, William Hart, but remained in the family dwelling to look after her mother. Shakespeare seems to have left his mother's affairs in her hands, since the Harts looked after Mary Shakespeare's estate upon her death 7 years later. We'll come to that. The death of John Shakespeare himself has been considered a defining event in his son's progress. It has been characteristically associated with the writing of Hamlet. That would make sense, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
For example, a play that was composed during the obligatory period of mourning. That's crazy. So he wrote Hamlet while mourning his father. In the first scene, the ghost of Hamlet's father comes back from the flames of purgatory, a holy Catholic territory, by the way, the one true faith, in order to haunt the earth. Wouldn't that be cool if like we could definitively, not that you care, but I think it would be cool if Catholics could like definitively claim Shakespeare. That would be based.
That would,
but I think he sort of transcends all of that. I mean, although it is rather important, it's very interesting to think that he was certainly influenced by it. I mean, everyone.
Oh yeah,
was.
yeah. I mean, yeah, it's tricky. I think it would be interesting to even know at the time how many people were kind of going with the Anglican thing because that's what they were supposed to. And in reading about the period, it's like, man, it seems like about 49% of people are actually Catholics. Yeah, it's
for real.
Yeah.
The available evidence supports the belief that Shakespeare himself played the part of the dead father.
Wow.
It is a suggestive impersonation, adding to the fact that the title of the play evokes the name of his own dead son. In this period, fathers and sons are deeply implicated in the workings of his imagination. In this play, too, the inheritance from father to son is riven and brutally distracted. It is also Shakespeare's longest play. and it has been calculated to require a playing time of 4.5 hours. Far too long to be performed entire in the 16th century, even if the playing time were stretched to the maximum. It suggests that he wished or was determined to include all its connections and associations. We must not use the anachronistic vocabulary of obsession or compulsion in this matter. We can only say with certainty that there was much for Shakespeare to dramatize. Richard Burbage played the titular hero. It was a part in which he could excel and prove to an almost excessive degree that the art of Elizabethan drama was the art of character. There's an allusion to Burbage's acting of Hamlet in a poem of 1604, which describes how the apparent madness of the prince was signified by Burbage sucking on a pen as if it were a tobacco pipe and drinking from an ink pot as if it were a bottle of ale. It seems to have been a memorable piece of stage business. If we were to provide a jingle-like anatomy of Hamlet's changing passions, however, it would read something like this. In turn, Hamlet displays himself as ironic, sincere, obedient, despairing, disgusted, welcoming, questioning, disgusted, speculative, impetuous, angry, scholarly, antic, jocular, actorish, despairing, of mimic disposition, sarcastic, welcoming, speculative, despairing, exuberant, self-punishing, changeable, very, confused, contemptuous, actorish, courteous, playful, threatening, hesitant, fierce, scornful, rhetorical, bewildered, soul-searching, macabre, furious, mocking, stoical, parodic, and resigned. Wow. It has become well known as a part to challenge actors to play it competently. By general consent, they have to drag into the light parts of their personality they thought they had lost. All right. So we're to the point where he's written Hamlet, and we can see sort of where that would come from. Yeah.
Now Hamlet, my understanding was Hamlet not performed during Shakespeare's lifetime. Is that
no? It was Richard Burbage performed it. I mean, yeah. All
right.
That's what they're saying anyway.
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe
now I'm getting all scrambled with everything I've read.
Well, that's all right because you're doing your own research, and again, you know, I mean, if we get something wrong and you are like a Shakespeare scholar, and we get something really wrong, like reach out artofdarkpod@gmail.com. Just here's a little bit about Richard Burbage.
Let's do it.
He was born in 1567, died in 1619. He was an English stage actor, widely considered to have been one of the most famous actors of the Globe Theatre. It sounds like he originated Hamlet. All right, so I'm just going to go. He was born in London, second son of his parents. He and his brother Cuthbert stepped in to rescue the family's interest in two London theaters and found themselves tied up in lawsuits. Okay, so they end up being involved in the Globe. They did very well. He was like an influence for Hamlet too, which is very interesting. Yeah, Burbage was the first ever actor to play Hamlet and continued to act until he died. Aside from Hamlet, he was also known for his role as the Duke from Measure for Measure. His acting style allowed him to easily slip into character. He was known to play characters believably, a difficult feat during his time. Because of theater being a newer form of formal entertainment in Elizabethan England, actors could not rely on suspension of disbelief to aid their performance. Yeah, people were still learning.
Right.
Like, wait, he's not. What do you mean he's not a prince?
Right, exactly.
What do you mean?
He's
a prince.
I think only actual princes should play princes.
He's dressed like a prince. What do you mean this guy's not a prince?
Right. Yeah. This whole thing's BS. I don't believe any of this.
This is like the AI of their time. They couldn't believe it. You're telling me that guy isn't a duke?
Right.
No, that's the same guy that was the prince in the thing we saw last week.
How did he go from being a prince to
a duke to a prince?
I don't understand.
Yeah. This was the Facebook AI slop of its time. Yeah, Burbage was known as one of the best actors of his time. Believed that his performances were so influential to acting during the time that echoes of his performance as Hamlet are still seen in the way the characters perform today. I mean, that's crazy. Wow. That's awesome. Yeah. That gives me chills. That's so cool. That's like Brando. Cool. He was like the Brando of his period. They were inventing this thing.
Right.
Yeah. I really hope I'm getting that over, like how original this was. I mean, Yeah, Burbage remained a crowd favorite even when younger actors emerged for 35 years and was an idol of his age. His last recorded performance was in 1619, but he acted with the King's Men until his death in 1619. His death caused such an outpouring of grief that it threatened to overshadow the official mourning for the death of Queen Anne 10 days prior. Hey, we're in mourning for the Queen here.
Yeah.
Your actor, that's fascinating.
Show must go on.
Yeah, he was
Yeah.
buried in St. Leonard's Shoreditch, a church close to two theaters, the theater and the Curtain Theater. His gravestone was said to read, now listen to this, I love this. His gravestone was said to read, "Exit Burbage."
That's excellent. Yeah, that's awesome.
Although his gravestone is now lost, a memorial to him and his brothers was erected in a later century. An anonymous poet composed for him a funeral elegy on the death of the famous actor Richard Burbage, who died on Saturday in Lent, 13 March 1619, an excerpt of which reads, "He's gone, and with him what a world are dead, which he reviewed to be revived so. No more young Hamlet, old Hieronymo, kind Lear and grieved Moor, and more beside that lived in him have now forever died." Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's very cool. I love it.
Yeah.
You know, and everybody gets really sentimental. It's easy in the West here to kind of get really sentimental about something like a mandala and how, oh, it's so mystical and it's all about the impermanence of being and of nature. It's like, bitch, we do that in the theater.
Yeah.
Every act of making a play is a mandala.
Yeah.
It dies. It's reborn every night and dies every night.
Right.
And then you close the show.
Right.
Yeah. There's a whole, and if you've never been a part of show business, you've never been a part of making a play, there's a whole arc of emotion that comes along with it.
Oh, sure.
There's a reason people have showmances. There's a reason people have. It's hard to say goodbye to a production too.
Oh, sure. I can imagine, especially you got a long run that you've really put a lot into. Like
you work on something for 2 months together with this ad hoc family or more.
Right.
You go touring with people. I mean, it's a unique world for sure. All right, cool. I got to get back to Hamlet here. I have so much. I don't know how much of this Hamlet stuff I'm going to cover, but I'll do my best. Let's see here. So the story of Hamlet is rooted in legends from various cultures, including Italian, Spanish, Scandinavian, Byzantine, and Arabian, suggesting an Indo-European origin of the core hero as fool theme. Among the earliest versions of this tale are the Scandinavian saga of Hrolf Kraki, where the slain king's son, Hor and Helgi, sons disguise themselves under false names, diverging from Shakespeare's narrative where Hamlet feigns madness. Another precursor is the Roman legend of Brutus, documented in Latin texts, where the protagonist Lucius changes his name to Brutus, adopting the guise of a fool to evade the fate that befell his father and brothers, eventually avenging their deaths. That's the Lion King as Hamlet, man. I mean, this is a story as old as old. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, not only the fool is the hero, but the betraying brother, fighting for the throne, all of it. Yeah,
absolutely. Significant early influences also come from the 13th century life of Amleth by Saxo Grammaticus, contained in Gesta Danorum, the Danish stories. This work, which portrays similar themes such as the prince's feigned madness and his acts of retribution against a usurping uncle, was accessible in Shakespeare's time in Latin, emphasizing Roman virtues of heroism. The tale was later adopted by Francois de Belforest in 1570, who added to the narrative a sense of melancholy. Shakespeare's Hamlet might have been influenced by an earlier play known today as the Hamlet, thought to have been written by Thomas Kyd or even Shakespeare himself. This hypothesized version would have predated Shakespeare's adaptation and included elements like a ghost. The play, though lost, is believed to have been part of the repertoire of the Chamberlain's Men before Shakespeare reworked it. Despite the lack of physical evidence of the Hamlet, scholars like Andrew Cairncross have postulated that Shakespeare likely wrote this earlier version. So he wrote an earlier version and then what we got as a later
Sure. Yeah.
one. The amalgamation of sources for Hamlet likely includes the Hamlet, Belforest's adaptations, and elements from Saxo's narratives that are not found in earlier versions. This blend showcases Shakespeare's ability to synthesize varied sources into a cohesive and compelling narrative. Scholars dismiss the connection between his son Hamnet, right, despite the similarities in the name. Although he lost his son, he lost his father.
Mm-hmm.
Here we have a son who's lost his father. It's all there.
Yeah, I don't think it's not like Hamnet was a popular name at the time or something. It's not like John,
Right. Yeah, true. Yeah. It's a bit of an odd name, isn't it?
I think there could be something to it, but
Hamnet. Odd. The character of Polonius, the kind of windbag, who says brevity is the soul of wit after blathering on, which is a very, very, very funny moment, has been speculated to be a caricature of William Cecil, Lord Burghley, Queen Elizabeth I's chief counselor. While some scholars like E.K. Chambers and John Dover Wilson support this theory based on similarities in their advisory rules and verbose guidance to their sons, others like Harold Jenkins argue that any direct parody of Burghley is merely conjectural. Determining the exact date of Hamlet's composition proves challenging. Estimates range from 1599 to 1601. The play's references to Shakespeare's Julius Caesar suggest it followed closely after that play's creation around the middle of 1599. Some registries from Stationer's Register, Stationer's Register entries indicate that Hamlet was performed. So these must be records from the period. Performed by the middle of 1602, suggesting a composition shortly before then. They wouldn't write something and then have it sit on the shelf. Like they were writing to have it done. Like, hey,
we got a production. They have like a production system
schedule. System and a schedule. Yeah, it was serious business.
Yeah,
I mean, talking about packing.
Go ahead.
No. I mean, talking about packing
I was just
3,000 people in.
That Lord Burghley reference, Polonius being Lord Burghley. I just wonder if Lord Burghley happened to know Edward de Vere at all. So that's a little teaser.
Okay.
Yeah. Most of Oxford's surviving letters are written to Lord Burghley, William Cecil.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is just one half of the story, people.
Right.
You're gonna have to tune in to Brad's episode and really see which of these you come away believing. Okay. So let's see here. Scholarly debate continues, informed by reviews of performances, textual allusions, and publishing records, underscoring the enduring fascination with pinpointing the origins of Hamlet, which we read for the book club, which you can join or listen back to. You can listen back to all the book club episodes if you subscribe to Patreon and or Substack. You really only need one of them. They're exactly the same, whether you're a sub or you're a dom on Patreon. You get the exact same content.
I think I think if you subscribe to us on Substack, I think we're the subs.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Whatever you say, Brad. I don't know. I like the idea of calling the Substack people are subs and the Patreon people are doms. I think that's good. That's very on brand.
Okay.
In any case, in his final period, Shakespeare turned to romance or tragic comedy with Cymbeline, The Winter's Tale, The Tempest, and the collaborative Pericles, Prince of Tyre. These plays are graver than the comedies of the 1590s, but end with reconciliation and forgiveness. He also collaborated on Henry VIII and The Two Noble Kinsmen, likely with John Fletcher. And I want to talk briefly about The Tempest, which is one of my favorite plays from Shakespeare.
It's good. It might be the only Shakespeare production I've seen in person.
Is that right?
I think it is. Yeah.
Where did you see it and when?
I saw it at the Idaho Shakespeare Festival around circa 2007, 2008. Yeah.
Great. What do you remember most about it?
I mean, there was a guy who played Caliban who was quite good. Just
that's a great role.
It is a great role. And he full send, like he was gonna play Caliban. God damn it. So that was probably the most memorable strike. I can still sort of see him in my head.
I love it.
Yeah, it was a lovely production. Shout out to Idaho Shakespeare Festival. I saw a bunch of great stuff. They don't just do Shakespeare. It's every year. I saw Oh, what's the George Bernard Shaw Pygmalion there, which was fantastic. I saw a bunch of great stuff there. If you're in Idaho, go.
Go to the theater.
Yeah.
Go to the theater, people.
Mm.
Yeah, very cool. I saw a production of The Tempest that Patrick Stewart did, where he played
Oh, wow.
Prospero. And it was
Cool. Yeah.
amazing. Yeah, the
Yeah.
Royal Shakespeare Company. And
Excellent. That's amazing.
they make it look easy.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
really
Patrick Stewart
ridiculous.
is,
It's like painful.
yeah.
Yeah, I've seen him. I've seen Patrick Stewart 3 times. I
Oh,
saw him
really?
in that. Yeah, I saw him in that. I saw him do Anthony and Cleopatra.
Wow.
Ooh, maybe 3, 4 times. I saw him do. He loves to do theater,
Yeah.
which I just love, and he just crushes it. I mean, it's
Mhm.
just absurd, and it's not
Mhm.
this. It's not the oh well, he's on the TV. It's like the
Right.
dude is just he was just born to do this.
No, they put him
Um,
on the TV because they wanted a
right,
guy
right.
like
They
him.
wanted that. Yeah, they
Yeah.
wanted that on TV.
Right.
Yeah, and then I saw him do. I'm pretty sure I saw him do Julius Caesar.
Cool.
And then
Awesome.
I saw him in a Pinter play with
Nice.
oh God, his name's escaping me. Gandalf.
Ian McKellen. No.
Yeah,
McKellen?
McKellen. Yeah,
Yeah.
Ian McKellen. Yeah,
Ian
yeah.
McKellen.
Is that Ian McKellen? Yeah, that was really, really cool. Although very different from friggin'
Sure.
Shakespeare
I
doing
bet. Yeah.
the Pinter. Um, all right, so where are we? Yeah, so The Tempest believed to have been written between late 1610 and mid 1611. So right at the end, it's one of the final plays that he wrote on his own. Timing is debated. The Tempest was registered by the station's register on the 8th of November, 1623, which is a date when 16 of the plays were entered into the register. The origins of the plot are not traced back to a single source. Instead, it appears to draw on a variety of influences, the most notable being William Strachey's A True Repertory of the Rack and Redemption of Sir Thomas Gates Knight. This document recounts the 1609 shipwreck of the Sea Venture on the Bermudas on its voyage to Virginia, an event that likely inspired the play's dramatic opening storm scene and elements of survival in an isolated setting. Although Strachey's report wasn't officially published until 1625, it circulated in a manuscript form, notably in a letter dated July 15th, 1610, which Shakespeare may have had access to. This is such a good reminder, too, as an artist, as a writer, especially. You don't have to have anything, you don't have to start from nothing. You never have to
Right.
start from nothing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't feel like you've just got to come up with something whole cloth.
That's
You know,
true.
and
Yeah.
what ends up happening, too, is if you think you're creating something original, and this is a little
Yeah.
self-serving, but I got this radio play coming out this summer. We'll promote it. We're gonna have people
Mhm.
come on the show. We're gonna have samples from it. Friend of the pod, Matthew Kelly, who came on and did the Lovecraft episode, is part of the company that is involved in it. It's called Basilisk. And you know, we come up with this idea that we're sort of like, oh, okay, here's the idea. And like midway through, I'm like, oh, this is Frankenstein.
Right. Yeah.
And that's fine. And that's fine.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, and like, you know, and when I was working on moderation, I'm like, it was only after it's often very helpful in the middle of what you're writing to figure out what you're writing because you're not writing anything wholly original.
Right.
You're
Well,
just
and then
not.
you
You never
then
are.
you've got a shape that's like kind
Mhm.
of out there that you can play with and use and lean on and
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you ever come up with something wholly original that has no influence, like, please let me know. I'd be very curious to
Right,
see what
right.
you've written.
Yeah.
But, you know,
Yeah.
so I say sort of embrace it.
Mhm.
You know, it's fine if you don't consciously know what you're doing, but it's like when I wrote moderation, it was only after I'm like, oh, this is the dumb waiter, but with, social media content instead of
Yeah.
objects coming into the, it's always,
Yeah.
something has always been done before.
Sure. Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's see here. Yeah, so another significant influence on The Tempest is Sylvester Jourdain's A Discovery of the Bermudas, published on the 13th of October, 1610. This account provides further context to the Bermudas shipwreck, reinforcing the theory of Shakespeare's use of contemporary narratives. Additionally, Michel de Montaigne's essay, Of the Cannibals, translated into English by John Florio in 1603, is thought to have inspired Gonzalo's utopian speech about an ideal commonwealth in Act 2, Scene 1, reflecting Montaigne's positive portrayal of native societies in the New World. The Tempest also includes elements typical of Italian commedia dell'arte, suggesting Shakespeare's familiarity with that theatrical tradition, which often featured characters and plot lines similar to those developed in the play. The structure of the narrative, with its mix of magical elements, shipwreck survival, and mysterious islands, shows Shakespeare's skill in blending various literary and cultural influences into a unique dramatic concoction. And this would only appear, it appeared in the first folio that was published in 1623 after he died. But in any case,
Was it not actually performed during
it's
lifetime?
it's not clear to me. I mean, if it was
Yeah.
only put in the register, it's possible that it maybe wasn't performed.
I mean, if it's his last play, it kind of makes sense that maybe it just didn't happen. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I would assume, that, you know, I'm looking here. I'm looking up for when it was first performed because I'd be very curious to know. Yeah, I mean, and this is a play that I would say if you can get, if you don't know The Tempest or you've never seen it performed, I would say do it. Yeah, so here we go. A record exists of a performance of The Tempest on the 1st of November, 1611, by the King's Men before James the First and the English royal court. So yeah, it got performed.
Okay. Yeah.
At the palace, at Whitehall Palace on Hallowmas night. The play was one of the 6 Shakespeare plays and 8 others for a total of 14 acted at court during the winter of 1612, 1613. They did 6.
That's
Wait, they
wild.
did 6 of his plays. They did 14 plays at court
During the
during the
winter.
winter.
That's
Right.
That's wow.
As part
That's
of
a
the
lot.
that's a lot. As
Yeah.
part of the festivities surrounding the marriage of Princess Elizabeth and Frederick V, the elector of the Palatinate of the Rhine.
Yeah.
There is no further public performance recorded prior to the Restoration, but in his 1669 preface to the Dryden Davenant version, John Dryden states that The Tempest had been performed at the Blackfriars Theatre. Careful consideration of the stage directions within the play supports this, strongly suggesting that the play was written with Blackfriars Theatre rather than the Globe Theatre in mind. Very cool. Yeah, they wouldn't memorize that thing once and then just never do it again, even if it was for the king. I mean, that's too much.
Yeah, I would think, right.
Yeah. I also think that like their memorization, because it was poetical, I think they probably had tricks to like mnemonic
Oh,
tricks
probably
to memorize because of the poetry is maybe easier to memorize than just straight up natural speech, whatever that is.
That could very well be. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I promise I'm bringing this on home. I promise you we're doing all right. Yeah. Okay. I mean, we've covered a lot. We've covered some of his work.
Absolutely. Tempest, Hamlet.
I mean, Tempest, the Hamlet. We could go on and on. We could labor. We could do hours and hours talking about
There
all
are
of the plays.
39 plays, but I think if you
Mackers,
I think if you haven't read any if you or just really delved into the actual work of Shakespeare, Hamlet and Tempest are good ones because they are they're the most, I'm looking for the right term here. They've got the most like cool stuff happening in them. Ghosts and storms and like magic and and then that's not to dismiss any of the other plays, but I think they're a cool entry point, those two.
I'd throw Antony and Cleopatra into that mix too, because that is like a sexy, yeah. And then maybe one of the comedy, maybe Midsummer.
Okay. Yeah.
But you really can't go wrong. I mean, and I would encourage people too. I would remind people that this stuff is not meant to be read. It's not meant to read Shakespeare. The sonnets you can read, but all of this stuff is meant to be put in people's mouths. And so, and if you're out in the middle of nowhere, you can't get access to theater. One, I bet you can find it if you go looking. Two, even within an hour of you, 90 minutes of you. Two, go online. Like if you really are interested in this and you're like a young person who hasn't been exposed to any of this stuff, you can make a little ad hoc at home curriculum for yourself and just say, you know what, instead of rewatching True Detective season 1, which hey, do that too. You can do, but seriously, you could just say, I'm going to watch these 20 adaptations on film and get exposed to it. And it's meant to be experienced like that.
And it's a good idea, I think, too, to one thing you can, I think, do for, and this helped me in our book club. I mean, I was watching the Branagh adaptation of Hamlet, and then I also was kind of reading it at the same time. And it really does help the comprehension to have the text and watching it, because the weird little word choices that don't really immediately make sense to the modern audience, you get to see how the actor plays it out, and that's like a context clue. It's really helpful to like understanding what the hell is going on, but having both in front of you. So, yeah.
Right on. Cool.
Yeah.
All right, so we're moving along here in his life. Let's see. His mother had been occupying the old house in Henley Street together with Shakespeare's sister Joan Hart, who continued to live there after Shakespeare's own death. Shakespeare must have visited his mother there before her death. She was buried on the 9th of September of 1608. She died in the late summer of 1968. It has been suggested that Coriolanus was written at Stratford because of the large supply of stage directions in the published text. Thus, there is written, "In this mutiny, the tribunes, the aediles, and the people are beat in, and Marcius follows them to gates and is shut in." The argument postulates that he did not intend to be present for any of the rehearsals of the first performances, and so had to be more than usually explicit in his directions for the actors. So there's a chance he was just there, or he was in Stratford just before. And you're going to get into some of these lawsuits, right, Brad? But just before his mother's death, Shakespeare sued a Stratford neighbor, John Addenbrooke, for debt in the borough court. The sum of £6 was not forthcoming, and so Shakespeare sued Addenbrooke's surety for the money. The case continued for 10 months, a clear sign of Shakespeare's determination in such matters. In October, he stood as godfather to the infant son of the alderman, Henry Walker, who was christened as William. He left the child a bequest in his will. It is important to note that Shakespeare could be accepted as a godfather only if he had outwardly conformed to the Church of England. There were clear rules on this matter, particularly since the godfather was charged with the spiritual education of the child. No nonconformist or recusant would have been permitted in that role. For the ceremony, Shakespeare would have received Holy Communion as a token of his Orthodox faith. As the child of a recusant household, attached to the old faith but conforming to the observances of the new, he would have grown up with a profound sense of doubt. This is why ambiguity becomes one of the informing principles of his art, and why should it not be a mark of his behavior in the world? All right. So they go on and talk a little more about it. There have been many studies of the association between Catholicism and the theater itself. At the time, most of our present English actors, as I am credibly informed, being professed papists. William Prynne's observation does not help to entangle Shakespeare's private allegiances, however, and at most suggests that as an actor and dramatist, he might have evinced a certain sympathy with the old faith. All right. So we've talked about it. It is possible that he was, in the language of the period, a church papist. He outwardly conformed, as in the ceremony of christening, but secretly remained a Catholic. This was a perfectly conventional stance at the time. There is also the statement by Richard Davies, the Archdeacon of Coventry, that he died a papist. The Archdeacon was a zealous Anglican and would not have passed on this report with any great pleasure. It is not known how he received the information, but it is not necessarily inauthentic. It can be taken to mean that Shakespeare was given the sacrament of extreme unction, anointing the sick, at the time of his death. But this may have been at the instigation or even the insistence of his recusant family. He may have been too weak and too sick to comprehend the matter. Yet it is also sometimes the case that lapsed or quondam Catholics will in extremis embrace the possibility of redemption. All right. So, yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah. The stakes, as you said earlier, of how you practice your religion were interesting at that. I mean, the other thing too is like you could conform outwardly, and then some political stuff could happen, and you'd be like, oh, now the thing I believed 6 months ago is illegal. Cool. Like, you know what I mean? Like they could very easily, these things could turn over. The chances of them turning over were real. And so you could be all on board with whatever the regime says now, and then somebody gets their head chopped off, and now all of a sudden that thing is illegal. It's very
Precarious.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
really is.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, in throwing out whole sacraments, like sacraments whole cloth, it's pretty hardcore. I
it
mean,
is.
if when you
Yeah,
understand
yeah.
what you believe the sacraments, we're going to keep these can
Yeah.
go.
Right. And then who's deciding this and why? Like, what is there an
Sure.
actual reason for it? And where does
Just
everything
follow
come
that
from?
logic, and that's how you end up, in a
Yeah.
strip mall.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
just,
Yeah.
I don't,
Right.
yeah, I don't know.
Right.
Anyway, it is what it is, but it's
Yeah.
very uncertain. It's a very uncertain period, and you can see
Mhm.
how that would give rise, as the author said here, to a mind like Shakespeare's, which seems to be able to exist in the medieval world, the early
Mhm.
modern world, and then our modern world. He has something to
Mhm.
say about all of it somehow.
Mhm.
Like a
Mhm.
really, truly a man out of time, um, right at the
Yeah.
center of the universe,
Yeah.
for a moment
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and
Absolutely.
still, I mean, I personally think, like, if once we take over and I am the Reich commandant of the American theater, there's going to be a hiatus on Shakespeare in America for an entire year. I think that
Ooh.
would be the
Okay.
best thing we could do for the American theater.
Like
And,
reset it.
that is
Yeah.
just reset it. Nobody does Shakespeare for a year, and
Mhm.
we focus entirely on American plays and American,
Well,
playwriting and
yeah. I
playwrights.
mean,
That would
there's
be
some virtue to that.
good for the theater.
Right. Right.
we
Right.
1 year. I'm just saying, 1 year
Yeah.
hiatus. What
Well,
what
well,
what
I
could go wrong?
no, I mean, I think I think there is a certain way that makes sense because I think most Americans, their introduction to the theater is somebody drops Romeo and Juliet or something on them when they're like 15, and 95% of kids are like, I don't give a shit about this. And then that's what theater is in your head. Right. And then, you and I, and a lot of other people too, but you and I kind of unlearned that. But not, a lot of people don't unlearn that. Right. And then, yeah, if you just keep the Shakespeare ball rolling every time you look up theater in my area and it's a Shakespeare play, you're like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to go to that.
Yeah, for real. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it, and I'm somebody who loves it. I
Oh, me
just think
too.
that,
Me
like, the
too. But
Shakespeare
yeah.
industry is a little much. It's a little,
Right.
the Disneyfication of Shakespeare is a little much and a little bit
Yeah.
annoying. Yeah,
Yeah. Well, it's like if every movie was, what would be an example?
we
I don't
cape
know.
shit. Cape shit.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
could we do a year with no cape shit? And
Right.
I mean, like, no Joker sequel. Anything
Right.
that's cape shit adjacent doesn't get
Yeah.
made for a
We
year.
just
Like, how
skip
much
it for a minute.
original, interesting, new stuff would happen if all that energy got funneled into something new and
Mm.
rich? But that's
Hmm.
not we live in this reheated, rehashed culture. And I
Right.
honestly do think the cult of Shakespeare contributes to that a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like,
I think that's
can
true.
we
Yeah.
elbow the fucker out of our heads for just a minute? Like,
Right.
and we're contributing to it too, but it's amazing. I just think that it would be an interesting experiment in
Yeah.
the future Reich, especially
Yeah.
for America too, because it's like,
Hmm.
yeah, we share a language in common,
Yeah. What else?
but
Yeah.
yeah, you
Yeah.
know. So
Yeah.
anyway, and again, I'm a huge Shakespeare stan. I'm not, I'm
Sure.
being somewhat tongue in cheek here, but it's
No,
also, it does
this
sort of
is
make
like
you wonder and think, like, if we're in stuck culture, why do we keep doing it? And then the director's answer is, well, it's gonna be Macbeth, but it's in the Third Reich. The costumes
right.
are Nazi costumes. It's like, oh
Right.
God,
Right. 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 Right.
oh,
Right.
it's just gonna be the Tempest, but they're on the moon.
Right.
Like, oh, I don't give a shit.
Right. Right.
Just
Right.
do the
Yeah.
play.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't know. I don't know. The other thing is, actors love to do it.
Oh, I'm sure. I mean, who, as an actor, who wouldn't want to do a Shakespearean,
Yeah,
yeah,
you
I
get to
totally
play
understand
Hamlet. You get to
that.
play Hamlet's father. You get to play.
Right.
It is like a religious. I mean, there's a quasi-religious spiritual
Hmm.
practice to
Hmm.
doing this stuff. I mean, it's like a
Yeah.
secular
Oh, to
spiritual
play the
kind of
same role that how many thousands of people have played for hundreds of years? I mean, yeah, that's
going
huge.
all the way
That's
back to the Bard himself. I mean,
right,
it's
right.
it's
Yeah,
heavy. Yeah, and
yeah.
real, like, serious actors, they'll do that research. They will read
Hmm.
about, I mean,
Other
and so it is. It's very
performances and yeah.
mystical and kind of. I was quite serious about that thing I said earlier about the mandala. Like, the theater
Hmm.
is not to be trifled with. It's a very real practice, and
Hmm.
everybody's all worried about money. And it's like, that's the last thing I think about when
Yeah,
I think about
right.
the theater.
Yeah,
Maybe I should think more about it, but it's like the last thing I think about. It's like, how much is it going to take to do this? Okay, let's get that money
yeah.
together. We'll do it, and we'll try to make the money back. But, like,
Right.
yeah. Anyway,
Yeah, yeah. Amen.
all right. Moving on. We're coming into the home stretch here. All right. So his mother's dead, his father's dead. He writes these sonnets, and I want
Mm.
to. Are you familiar with the portion of the sonnets that are called the Dark Lady sonnets, Brad?
Yes, yeah, a little bit, yeah,
Okay. All right. Well, we're going to
yeah.
read about the Dark Lady sonnets. So they were published in 1609. They reflect themes of love, time, mortality, and they're considered to be classics of poetry.
Mhm.
The sonnets include a series that are addressed to a fair youth, expressing deep affection, and another series dedicated to the Dark Lady, exploring themes of lust and betrayal. The identity of these figures remains a topic of speculation among scholars. They could be real or they could be fictional. And I've got the Dark Lady sonnets pulled up here from ShakespeareOxfordFellowship.org. I'm going to read a couple of them. In the old age, black was not counted fair, or if it were, it bore not beauty's name. But now is black beauty's successive heir, and beauty slandered with a bastard's shame. With a bastard shame. For since each hand hath put on nature's power, faring the foul with art's false borrowed face, sweet beauty hath no name, no holy bower, but is profaned, if not lives in disgrace. Therefore my mistress's eyes are raven black, her eyes so suited, and they mourners seem, at such who, not born fair, no beauty lack, slandering creation with a false esteem. Yet so they mourn, becoming of their woe, that every tongue says beauty should look so. Here's another one.
Banger.
My mistress's eyes are nothing like the sun. Coral is far more red than her lips red. If snow be white, why then her breasts are dun. If hairs be wires, black wires grow on her head. I have seen roses damasked, red and white, but no such roses see I in her cheeks. And in some perfumes is there more delight than in the breath that from my mistress reeks. I love to hear her speak, yet well I know that music hath a far more pleasing sound. I grant I never saw a goddess go, my mistress, when she walks, treads on the ground, and yet by heaven I think my love as rare as any she belied with false compare. All right.
Right.
Very interesting. I mean, these are love poems, right? But they're,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
But they're
Let me see.
sultry and
Mhm.
they're dark. They have not just dark descriptions of darkness, but there is a dark. I mean, the black wires on their head. I mean, yeah,
Mm. Mm.
there's a heaviness to them.
Let me see if there's one more. I don't know. This one's calling to me.
Mm.
Thou art as tyrannous, so as thou art, as those whose beauties proudly make them cruel. For well thou knowst, to my dear doting heart, thou art the fairest and most precious jewel. Yet in good faith some say that thee behold, thy face hath not the power to make love groan. To say they err, I dare not be so bold, although I swear it to myself alone. And to be sure that is not false, I swear, 1,000 groans, but thinking on thy face, one on another's neck, do witness bear, thy black is fairest in my judgment's place. In nothing art thou black, save in thy deeds, and thence this slander, as I think, proceeds. All right.
Right.
So these are the Dark Lady sonnets, and it has a whole Wikipedia. It's a woman described in its sonnets, so called because the poems make it clear that she has black, wiry hair and dark, dun-colored skin.
Mhm.
Yeah, so dun, D-U-N.
It's
Let me
like
see.
tan, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's what I would
Yeah.
slightly brownish, dark gray color. Yeah,
Yeah.
dun. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
That is a GRE word for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
A little more here. The description of the Dark Lady distinguishes itself from the fair youth sequence by being overtly sexual. Among these, sonnet 151 has been described as body, as
Ooh.
it and is used to illustrate the difference between the spiritual love for the fair youth and the sexual love for the Dark Lady. Well, we got to get 151. Okay. All right, let's get this body sonnet. You come to Art of Darkness for the body sonnets,
I mean,
right?
where
And you
else are you
stay
gonna
for the
go?
jokes. Where
Yeah.
else are you going to go for body sonnets? For real. Love is too young to know what conscience is, yet who knows not conscience is born of love. Then, gentle cheater, urge not my amiss, lest guilty of my faults thy sweet self prove. For thou betraying me, I do betray my nobler part to my gross body's treason. My soul doth tell me my body that he may triumph in love. Flesh stays no farther reason, but rising at thy name doth point out thee as his triumphant prize. Proud of this pride, he is contented by thy poor drudge to stand in thy affairs, fall by thy side. No want of conscience hold it that I call her love, for whose dear love I rise and fall.
Mm.
Ooh, there's a lot
Rising
of
and
talk of
falling.
rising. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Body,
Ooh.
very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
So right, the body imagery of the poem from the nobler part in line
Mm.
6, rising at thy name. It's rise and fall. Okay, right. So okay, yeah. And that's the kind of stuff that you got to be looking for in Shakespeare
Yeah.
because he's definitely doing that. He's
Yeah.
he's doing that in most of the plays too. There are
Mhm.
these little winks and nods, and it's all very illicit and kind of
I
subterranean.
This makes me wonder, like, there's so much writing on Shakespeare, right? There's like books literally that are like legal knowledge in Shakespeare. I wonder if anybody has written a monograph or something, the penis in Shakespeare.
You know what? I fairly guarantee somebody
I bet
has.
somebody has,
No
right?
dick jokes in the
Yeah.
work of Willie
Yeah.
Shakes.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Dot com. I guarantee it
Right.
exists. It may not be like a popular, but it's
Right.
it's there. It's all over it. Stand and unfold thyself.
Right. Right. Right.
Something like that. So yeah. So there's a lot of speculations about who this dark lady is.
Mhm.
Some suggest she could have been of Mediterranean descent, could be Greek, Spanish, Italian, French.
Mhm.
Some say she may have been African.
Mhm.
This is London. The
Mhm.
consensus is that she's fictional.
Mhm.
I'm gonna go out on a limb and say Willie Shakes probably wasn't celibate down there in ye old London town.
No. No, I don't
And
think
we're going
so.
to go on a little bit here.
And
One candidate is, let's see here, Black Luce, a brothel owner from Clerkenwell, known to have participated in Christmas revels at Gray's Inn. There's not direct evidence, but
mm,
she was very much on the theater scene.
mm,
So it's complicated. You can go on to the Wikipedia and there's a whole bunch of like speculations about who it might have been.
mhm.
Okay, so I have to read one of the earlier sonnets, one of the
So,
famous banger sonnets, Sonnet 18. They say he probably wrote this in the 1590s. And we're coming into the home stretch here. I'm going to read this one.
Okay.
Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Rough winds do not shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a date. Sometime too hot the eye of heaven shines, and often is his gold complexion dimmed, and every fair from fair sometime declines, by chance or nature's changing course untrimmed. But thy eternal summer shall not fade, nor lose possession of that fair thou owest. Nor shall death brag thou wanderest in his shade, when in eternal lines to time thou growst. So long as men can breathe or eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there you go.
All right.
Beautiful. All right.
All right.
So in 1613, he's still alive. He's still around.
Mhm.
During a performance of Henry VIII, the most cursed king in all time, of course, for
Yeah.
his great sins. The Globe Theater burnt down.
Really?
Oh
Okay.
yeah, oh yeah.
Okay.
So and this is from historyextra.com. On the 29th of June, 1613, the original Globe Theatre in London, where most of Shakespeare's plays debuted, was destroyed by fire during the performance of All Is True, known to modern audiences as Henry VIII. But
Hmm.
what caused the fire, and when was the new Globe Theater built? Okay, all right. Oh, now they want me to log in here.
Oh, come
He
on.
was these fuckers. Let me see here if I had this episode so well prepared. I was
You
like
did.
ready
You've
to
been killing
rock.
it, man.
Oh, thank you, dude. Okay.
Yeah.
Geez. Okay. Well, you know what? I can get. He was 49 years old when it happened. Um, he was at the height of his career. He was being imitated by younger writers, lauded by his contemporaries. He was part of the King's Men. He was. I'm not going to say he had the ear of the king, but he was like part of the King's I mean, the king had the imprimatur on his company. Um, Let me look up Globe Theater and get what I need.
Hmm.
Yeah, this is fun. So let's see here. Yeah, we'll go to history.com and see if they have a paywall.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Yeah. Oh, this doesn't give me what I need. Um, Brad, give me a vamp a little bit for me. What else do you have coming up this year? Who are you going to do after DeVere? I know I'm gonna
Well,
do Bowie.
yeah, we
That's
got a
gonna be
little
fun.
schedule of thinking. I'm not sure what the order is going to be here, but Cormac McCarthy for sure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Herman Melville as well.
Mm-hmm.
And who else I got? I'm blanking on her name now. The sort of mystic painter, Hilfa. What is her name? Hold on,
Look it up.
sorry.
No, you're all right.
Hilda Klimt. Uh,
Ooh.
and who else are we doing? Well, Houdini, of course. We've got a live show on Harry Houdini in Detroit, October 26th. It's going to be a little bit of a Halloween party, and we've got some special stuff coming. That is going to be we'll have more information about tickets and all of that soon, but definitely if you're anywhere in the area, come see us for that.
If you're out of the area, I mean,
Yeah.
it's getting to be July here, and
Yeah.
we're going to be in Detroit October 26th.
Yeah.
Tickets are going to go on sale. We're going to announce that first to the subs and the DOMs, Patreon and Substack, and you're not going to want to miss that. That's going to be a Halloween
Yeah.
party. Brad and I are going to dress up. We're not
Mhm.
going to give away what we're dressing up
No.
as. It's
No.
you're going to have to. It's going to be really exciting. It's going to be really fun, and we're going to do the death of Harry Houdini. There's going to be
Yes,
an
sir.
opener. There's going to be an on-theme opener. Get there.
Yeah.
Detroit, you get cheap hotels.
Yeah.
I know because I've already booked mine.
Yeah.
And if
Yeah.
you book ahead of time, this is going to be like an Art of Darkness meetup in addition to other things. I know there are going to be some people from the Telegram. There are going to be some patrons. There are going to be different people. Look at it like that.
Yeah.
It's a party. It's a Halloween party. It's a reason to get to the Paris of the North, the Paris of America.
Ah, yes, the
Detroit,
Paris of the North. Yeah.
the city of rivers and lights.
Nobody's called it the Paris of the Midwest in a while, but
And Brad
we're
Kelly.
bringing it
Brad
back.
Kelly's
Yeah.
home. We're bringing it.
Yeah.
I said
Yeah.
earlier, we're bringing sexy back.
We're bringing sexy back.
This is
Something
going to
like
ruin the tour.
that.
You missed
What,
it when you
the
stood
what
up. I
tour?
made it. Yeah, the world tour. Oh boy. Well, here I found what I needed. But
Oh,
yes,
good.
look out for that. It's going to be fun. October 26th. You can book your that the show will go on if you are so inclined to mark your calendar. Come and join us. It's going to be fun. There's nothing like doing it live. And by the way, it is show business. We're doing a little bit of theater there, even if it's a
Mhm.
live podcast, even if it's sort of ad libbed. We'll have
Mhm.
our, we're on book, right? We're not memorizing our script, but this is for me a fulfillment of a long dream that I've had to drag Brad Kelly onto the stage. I did it once, and now
Kicking and
he's
screaming
dragging
a little
me
bit,
on,
but
kicking
yeah.
and screaming. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Exit Brad Kelly.
Yeah. Well,
Pursued by a bear.
right. And this live Harry Houdini in Hamtramck Planet Ant. This is a independent theater mainstay in Detroit, Planet Ant. If you're from the area, you've heard of it. And so you're going to be supporting us, but you're also going to be supporting Planet Ant for all the great stuff that they do. So,
Sure. Yeah, and the
yeah.
Detroit economy.
Yeah.
We want to pack that place up too. So
Yeah.
we hope to see you there. That's going to be fun. All right. So I found what I needed from the book. An incident on the afternoon of Tuesday, the 29th of June, 1613, threw Shakespeare's plans into confusion. The king's men were playing All Is True, Henry VIII, which he had written in collaboration with a fellow named Fletcher. It was a new play, having been performed only 2 or 3 times. The courtier, Sir Henry Wotton, has left a complete account of the disaster that ensued. Now, he wrote, King Henry making a mask at the Cardinal Wolsey's house, and certain cannons being shot off at his entry. Some of the paper or other stuff wherewith one of them was stopped did light on the thatch, where being thought at first but an idle smoke, and their eyes trained more attentive to the show, it kindled inwardly, and ran round like a train, consuming within less than an hour the whole house to the very grounds. This was the fatal period of that virtuous fabric, wherein yet nothing did perish but wood and straw, and a few forsaken cloaks. Only one man had his breeches set on fire, that would perhaps have broiled him, if he had not, by the benefit of a provident wit, put it out with bottle ale. Somebody would have died if they hadn't like doused him
Yeah.
with beer.
Doused him with beer. That's awesome.
Yeah.
What a
Another
wild
observer
night.
of less sardonic temper noted that the fire catched and fastened upon the thatch of the house and there burned so furiously as it consumed the whole house, and all in less than 2 hours, the people having enough to do to save themselves. A third account confirmed that all of the spectators escaped without injury, except one man who was scalded with the fire by adventuring in to save a child which otherwise had been burnt. It was a disaster for the king's men, who had been deprived of a venue and investment in one swift action. It might have been an enactment of Prospero's words that the great globe itself shall dissolve and leave not a rack behind. So, I mean, they had to rebuild, it was going to cost them money, and obviously a nightmare. So here's another little scandal. There was a further private anxiety concerning his daughter, Susanna. In the summer of this year, she had brought an action of defamation against a neighbor, John Lane, who had claimed that she had the running of the reins and had been naught with Rafe Smith, that she had had sexual intercourse with Rafe Smith, in other words, and had contracted gonorrhea. In the small enclosed community of Stratford, these were controversial allegations indeed against the wife of a prominent doctor and daughter of a local eminence. The case was, and they have different libel laws over there to this day. Like you can't get away with talking. They have different understanding about it. The case was heard in the Bishop's Consistory Court at Worcester Cathedral, a measure of the seriousness with which the affair was taken. But John Lane did not appear for questioning. The case brought by Susanna Shakespeare was proved, and John Lane was excommunicated.
Ooh.
All right. Okay. So just a little bit of, so now he's
Yeah,
famous and his daughter is calling his daughter a whore and, this and that. And, Okay. All right.
Wouldn't be the first child of a wildly successful person to, go off the rails a little bit. Right?
Sure. And maybe she did, maybe she didn't,
Right.
Okay. All right. I'm going to bring us on home here. So Nicholas Rao was the first biographer to note and created a tradition later repeated by Samuel Johnson that Shakespeare retired to Stratford some years before his death, to Stratford. However, records indicate that he was still active in London as an actor in 1608. According to a statement from Cuthbert Burbage in 1635, after the King's Men acquired the lease for the Blackfriars Theatre in 1608, Shakespeare was among the players they placed there. It's worth noting that London was plagued by the bubonic plague throughout 1609, leading to extended closures of public playhouses and a scarcity of acting work. And I've got
you would move to the country if that's the case. I mean,
right. I mean, you would want to get. I mean, it's that's what a lot of people did during the recent affair. So let's see here. What do I have here? These aren't the right pages. Well, in any case, yeah. I mean, you can just about imagine what the plague was like, in London. He's talking about 100,000 people, and then all of like the filth and the, I mean, it's just like not a good scene. Right. You'd want to have like you say, you'd want to have a place in the country. No, I have it. 474 here. I'm just grabbing my pages. The continuance of the plague meant that in the summer and autumn of 1608, the King's Men were obliged to tour the provinces with their new plays. They were at Coventry at the end of October and also at Marlborough, but the rest of their progress is unknown. They were back in London, however, for the court performances of that year. They performed 12 plays at Whitehall, but the titles are not recorded. Okay, great. So there you go. So they're getting out of town for the plague.
Yeah.
He continued visiting London between 1611 and 1614. In 1612, he was a witness in a court case concerning the marriage settlement of a woman named Mary Mountjoy. So we've got records of him. It's like church and court records are like the sure records that people have.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Shakespeare returned to Stratford in the early month of 1612 to bury his brother Gilbert in the old church. Gilbert Shakespeare was 2.5 years younger. He had never married, living with his sister and her husband in the family home of Henley Street. We may have continued his father's trade as a glover. He was literate and well enough acquainted with business to act on his brother's behalf in the purchase of Stratford land. There was now one surviving brother, Richard Shakespeare, who also continued to live as a bachelor in Henley Street, but he too would die before Shakespeare himself. It would be a strange man who, under these circumstances, did not consider the limits of his own mortality. It was a shrinking family, emphasized by the fact that Shakespeare had no male descendants, direct or indirect. So he loses one of his
Yeah.
brothers, and then he would lose another one of his brothers before he were to die.
Yeah.
And we're almost there. In March of 1613, he bought a gatehouse in Blackfriars, and in November of Blackfriars is in London. And in November 1614, he spent several weeks in London with his son-in-law John Hall. After 1610, he wrote fewer plays, and none are attributed to him after 1613. The last three plays were likely collaborations with John Fletcher, who succeeded him as the house playwright for the King's Men.
Okay.
Yep. And he retired in 1613, shortly before the theater burned down during the performance of Henry VIII. The theater was angry. The theater had lost its luminary. Right. I love the idea that they're like putting off cannons during the productions and lighting sparks, and it's like,
whoops.
I mean, there's a reason we don't do open flames in the theater anymore. There's a reason.
Yeah.
We just don't need any of that. I've got a little bit about what it is that took him finally. Let's see. I have it here. The nature of his ill health or his disease has been endlessly debated. There are some who believes that he was suffering from tertiary syphilis, a not uncommon condition in the period and one to which he could undoubtedly have been exposed. Okay. Yeah. Well. Analysis of his. You don't want syphilis to be clickable in your Wikipedia bio.
No. Yeah. It's better if it's not.
Yeah. Analysis of his final signature has suggested that he had contracted a malady known as spastic cramp, a variety of Scrivener's palsy that affected voluminous writers. He's got his hands all messed up. This would make it impossible for him to write at any length and would also provide some explanation for his withdrawal from playwriting. Others have suggested that he died of alcoholism.
Wow.
Reference has already been made to the merry meeting between Shakespeare, Michael Drayton, and Ben Jonson. It is reported by the Stratford Vicar that they drank too hard, for Shakespeare died of a fever there contracted. This, of course, need not have been a sign of alcoholism. Yeah, it only takes one bad night. But I don't think it sounds like he didn't die. He didn't go out like Hendrix or anything like that.
Right.
The disease may have seized him suddenly and violently, withdrawing once only to invade him with greater virulence. A 17th century doctor noted that fevers were especially prevalent in Stratford and that 1616 was a particularly unhealthful year. In the winter of 1615 and 1616, there was an epidemic of influenza. The winter itself had been warm and tempestuous, a sure nurse of ague. There was also a small rivulet running past New Place, and it was later proven that these small streams were carriers of typhus. Yeah. The supposition might then be that he was carried off by typhoid fever. The funeral was held so soon after the death that his fatal illness may have been considered to be contagious. So,
there's about 1 million ways to get a fatal illness back then, right? It's just like
now. We're pretty good at like medicine on that side of things, kind of now, sort of. But I mean, a lot of it is hygiene and diet and
drinking water.
Yeah. Drinking water and the quality of food. I mean, just literally the quality of food, like rotten. There was, they're not putting stuff on ice. They're not, I mean, so.
And there's no like, well, I got to get my immune system up. You just eat whatever's there.
Available.
Like no nutritional understanding of anything.
Sure.
Yeah.
Shakespeare died on April 23rd, 1616, at the age of 52, about a month after signing his will. The will begins by describing him as being in perfect health, and no contemporary source explains the cause of his death. Half a century later, John Ward, the vicar of Stratford, noted that Shakespeare, Michael Drayton, and Ben Jonson were drinking. Okay, fine. Tributes from fellow authors reference his relatively sudden death, with one lamenting, "We wondered, Shakespeare, that thou wentst so soon from the world's stage to the grave's tiring room." He was survived by his wife, Anne, and two daughters. Susanna married physician John Hall in 1607, and Judith married vintner Thomas Quiney just 2 months before his death. He signed his will on March 25th of 1616. The following day, Quiney was found guilty of fathering an illegitimate son by Margaret Wheeler, both of whom died during childbirth. Oh,
good Lord.
The scandal would have shamed the entire family. Okay, all right. Yeah, but he didn't live to see that. But he saw he saw what he didn't live to see the baby die with the mother, but in any case, okay. So this stuff was, affecting him up until the very end, this kind of like gnarly sexuality and sort of death at the door at all times. In his will, he left the bulk of his estate to his daughter, Susanna, under the condition that it be passed down intact to her first son. However, the Quineys' 3 children all died without marrying, and the Hall's only child, Elizabeth, died childless in 1670, ending his direct line. His will makes little mention of his wife, Anne, who is likely entitled to 1/3 of the estate automatically. He did, however, specifically leave her his second best bed, a bequest that has sparked much speculation. Some see it as an insult, while others believe the second best bed would have been their matrimonial bed and therefore held sentimental value.
Right. Who knows?
He was buried in the chancel of Holy Trinity Church 2 days after his death. His grave's epitaph warns against disturbing his remains, a warning heeded during the church's restoration in 2008. Good friend, for Jesus' sake forbear to dig the dust enclosed here. Blessed be the man that spares these stones, and cursed be he that moves my bones.
That's because there's nobody in the grave.
Oh,
no, I'm just kidding. I'm just
coming
kidding.
soon. Coming soon.
I'm just kidding. That's not a common Oxfordian opinion. That's just
okay.
Me
That's
poking
just
holes.
Brad Kelly just adding. It's called "We Do a Little Misinformation." It's called
exactly.
we post a little misinformation on Maine. Before 1623, a funerary monument was erected in his memory on the north wall of the church, featuring a half effigy of him writing. The plaque compares him to Nestor, Socrates, and Virgil. In 1623, the first folio was published featuring the Drosshout engraving of Shakespeare. He has since been commemorated with numerous statues and memorials worldwide, including monuments in Southwark Cathedral and Poets' Corner in Westminster Abbey. I want to talk about the fate of the Globe real quick. Like all other theaters in London, the Globe was closed down by the outbreak of the First English Civil War, when the Long Parliament closed all London theaters by an ordinance dated the 2nd of September, 1642. It was pulled down in 1644 or 45 to make room for tenements. And today, of course, you can visit a reconstructed Globe near where the original location was in Southwark. And I want to end the main part of this episode before we tease the After Dark for patrons with a little bit from the very end of The Tempest. This is something that Prospero says when he finally breaks character and begs the audience to release him. The magician begs the audience to free him with their applause. And this is what he says. Now my charms are all o'erthrown, and what strength I have's mine own. Which is most faint, now 'tis true, I must be here confined by you, or sent to Naples, let me not, since I have my dukedom got, and pardon the deceiver dwell in this bare island by your spell. But release me from my bands with the help of your good hands. Gentle breath of yours my sails must fill, or else my project fails, which was to please, now I want, spirits to enforce, art to enchant. And my ending is despair unless I be relieved by prayer, which pierces so that it assaults mercy itself and frees all faults. As you from crimes would pardon be, let your indulgence set me free.
Nice.
He exits.
I love that. Yeah. Cut. Love it.
And whistles and blows, and he totally breaks the fourth wall.
Yeah, that's awesome.
In that
speech, I don't know that I really caught that audience part of it before.
Yeah, he's begging the magician is begging the audience to release him. He's saying, "Clap and please, and forget about whatever mistakes we made, and just let me go. Release me.
I'm trapped in a play. Let me out.
You're the ones who can release me."
Yeah, that's brilliant. Yeah.
Yeah,
well, nice
and
job,
you can release us with your support. I'm going to get a little break, 10, 15 minutes. We're going to come back. We're going to do an After Dark on the After. Thank you, Brad. Thank you.
Yeah,
I had fun doing that.
What are we talking about? What are we talking about in the After Dark?
We're going to talk about one of the most famous comic actors of the period, William Kemp, and for whom he was like famous for his body dances. So we're going to talk a little more about body dances, which I think is so funny. We're going to talk explicitly about sexuality in Shakespeare's England and in his plays. And then I've got this great page from shakespeare.org.uk where we have a bunch of Shakespearean phrases. We're going to run down a bunch of Shakespearean phrases. And this is for patrons on the After Dark. We do this for every episode. Got to ask the closing question, Brad. What is the bard doing if he emerges, if he were to, in his prime, he's 20 years old and he comes from the country to London today? Yeah. What do you think he gets up to?
I mean, I think he starts out trying to make theater and then he ends up doing something much more digital. Like much more, because I really keyed in on the thing you said about, he's basically making these plays for the popular audience, but he's also kind of trying to drag them into higher levels of sophistication. So I think you might see him making internet quote unquote content, but trying to elevate it. Yeah.
He would have to be. I could see him possibly doing something. It's so tricky to say right now. Sure. I mean,
with that gulf
if it was 100 years ago, he'd be in film, or even 50 years ago, he'd be doing film. I don't know. Yeah. Film seems like an obvious thing that he would gravitate toward because there's room to explore still in film. Film is still very young. Yeah. So but I think he's just a genius of the human psyche and of the human spirit and of narrative structure and meta. And he'd be writing something. That's what I know. He'd be writing something for performance. He'd be scripting something dramatically that's presented in a popular way, which to me that seems like film. But you're also right. Like maybe there's something online. There's some new thing. Maybe I don't know.
Maybe he writes for the WWF or the WWE.
Well, whatever Shakespeare, he would be inventing the post-human. In this period, whatever that means.
Right.
Okay. All right. Cool. Well, we'll be back. And I mean, we answered the question. The answer is, of course, to pod. And we did that.
Pod. Yeah.
All right. And Brad's going to exit and I'm going to pursue him. Like a bear.